The afternoon sun hung low over Rizal Park in Manila, casting warm orange light across the open field where a small stage had been set up for a free public talent show. Families sat on plastic chairs, vendors pushed carts of fish balls and taho, and children ran barefoot across the grass, laughing. The event was simple, nothing fancy, but it brought joy to people who needed a break from the weight of daily life. The Spread the Smile team moved around with their cameras, capturing the cheerful faces and hopeful performers waiting for their turn. Behind the stage stood a little girl named Mira, only 9 years old, staring at the crowd with nervous eyes. She wore a faded dress 2 sizes too big for her, the fabric worn thin from years of use. Her slippers were broken, the left one tied together with a piece of straw she had found earlier that morning. Her hair was tied back loosely, but strands kept falling in front of her face every time the wind blew. She held her stomach without thinking, trying to ignore the pain of hunger that had followed her for days. She didn't come with family. She didn't come with friends. She had walked from a small corner in Ermita, where she often stayed with other homeless children, some older, some younger. That morning she had woken up with only one thought: maybe today she could sing for food. Someone had told her about the talent show and said people might give snacks to performers. Mira didn't know if it was true, but it was the only hope she had. When her name was called, next performer, Mira, she froze for a moment. The host smiled kindly, motioning for her to come forward. The Spread the Smile cameraman paused, noticing her thin frame and trembling hands. Mira stepped onto the stage, the wooden planks creaking under her light weight. The crowd, noisy just seconds earlier, slowly quieted as they noticed the little girl who looked like she hadn't eaten in days. She approached the microphone with small, hesitant steps. Her eyes scanned the audience. Strangers, families, tourists, people eating snacks she could smell from the stage. The scent of fried chicken and rice made her stomach twist painfully. She swallowed hard. The host bent down and asked gently, "Hi, sweetheart. What made you join today?" Mira looked down, wringing her fingers. Her voice came out almost like a whisper, trembling and fragile. If I sing well, will you give me a plate of food?" For a few seconds, everything stopped. The wind seemed to hush. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the birds above quieted. People exchanged glances, their hearts tightening at the innocence and desperation in her question. The cameraman lowered his equipment slightly, blinking back emotion. Vendors stopped cooking. Children stopped playing. The world paused for this tiny voice. The host's smile faded into something softer, gentler. He touched her shoulder and said, "Of course. Sing whatever you want, Anak." Mira nodded shyly. The instrumental of Anak by Freddie Aguilar was chosen because it was one of the only songs she knew. As the first notes played through the speakers, she closed her eyes, took a shaky breath, and tried to forget how hungry she was. She tried to remember her mother's face, a face she hadn't seen in months, and the way she used to hum that same song while washing clothes by the river. The crowd leaned forward, waiting. And in that moment, with hunger in her belly and hope on her lips, Mira prepared to sing, not for applause, not for dreams of fame, but simply for the chance to fill her empty stomach. The first note of the instrumental drifted softly through the speakers, a familiar melody that carried both sadness and strength. Mira stood motionless at the center of the stage, her small hands gripping the microphone as though it were the only thing keeping her upright. The crowd waited, holding their breath. Even the vendors who normally shouted to attract customers seemed frozen, staring at the little girl whose voice had already broken their hearts before she had sung a single word. When Mira finally opened her mouth, her voice came out faint at first, almost fragile enough to disappear into the Manila breeze. But as the melody wrapped around her, something inside her shifted. Her voice steadied, grew warmer, richer. Far too emotional and mature for someone her age. It wasn't the voice of a child singing for fun. It was the voice of someone who knew hunger, fear, loneliness. Every word trembled with lived experience. People standing near the front felt tears rising before they could stop them. A mother holding her baby pressed a hand to her chest. A group of teenagers who had been laughing moments earlier fell silent, watching with wide eyes. Even the tourists with cameras lowered them slowly, as though interrupting the moment would be wrong. The Spread the Smile team kept recording, their lens capturing every quiver in her voice, every flicker of sadness in her eyes. Behind the camera, one crew member whispered, "My God, she's incredible." Another wiped his eyes discreetly, pretending dust had gotten into them. When Mira reached the first emotional peak of the song, her voice cracked, not from lack of skill but from too much feeling. It was the kind of crack that made people feel the meaning behind the lyrics, the kind that revealed a child who carried burdens heavier than her tiny frame. A man in the audience, holding a bag of groceries, stepped closer. He didn't know her story, but something in her voice pulled him toward the front like a magnet. A group of older women near him began quietly crying. One whispered, "Kawawa naman." She's singing from her soul. Children who were playing minutes earlier gathered near the stage, their eyes wide, their small faces reflecting the weight of her song even if they didn't fully understand it. A vendor offered free fish balls to the crowd, but stopped mid-sentence when Mira hit a long trembling note that echoed across Rizal Park. The sound carried far, past the fountains, past the trees, past the families scattered across the grass. Her voice reached people who weren't even part of the show, pulling them closer, making strangers gather like she was a lighthouse calling lost ships. As she continued, the emotions in her voice intensified. Memories she tried to push away, her mother leaving, nights she slept hungry, days she begged for coins, surfaced with every verse. The crowd didn't know her past, but they felt the truth in her voice, raw and unfiltered. Someone near the back whispered, "She's a star. How does someone like her end up on the streets?" By the time she reached the final verse, many in the audience openly cried. The host, standing at the edge of the stage, quickly wiped tears before the camera pointed his way. Even he was shaken by the power of this little girl who had asked only for a plate of food. When the last note faded, the entire park remained silent for a full second. No applause, no cheering, just stunned quiet. Then, as if a dam broke, the crowd erupted into claps, cheers, whistles, tears, and people standing on their feet. Mira lowered her head shyly, overwhelmed. She hadn't sung to impress them. She had sung because hunger had left her no other choice. And yet, without knowing, she had just shaken the hearts of everyone in Rizal Park, and soon, the entire world. The video of Mira's performance spread across social media like a spark in dry grass. Within hours it reached thousands. By the next morning it had reached millions. People from Manila, Cebu, Davao, Iloilo and abroad shared it with captions like "This broke my heart," "A voice full of pain," and "Someone help this child." The Spread the Smile team didn't expect the clip to explode the way it did, but the world had connected instantly with the little girl who sang for food. Among the people who watched the video was someone who rarely reacted emotionally to online clips, Simon Cowell. Sitting in his home office in Los Angeles, he clicked the video thinking it was just another audition-style moment. But the moment the little barefoot girl appeared on his screen, he leaned forward, his expression shifting. He watched silently as Mira asked, "If I sing well, will you give me a plate of food?" That single sentence hit him harder than he expected. As Mira began singing, Simon removed his glasses and placed them on the table. His eyes, usually sharp and analytical, softened. He wasn't judging her. He wasn't evaluating her technique. He was witnessing a child fighting to survive through music. Halfway through the song, he whispered to himself, "Oh my God, this is heartbreaking." He watched the video twice, then a third time. Each time he saw new details. The way her voice quivered not from fear but from hunger. The way the crowd reacted. The way she tried so hard to stand tall despite her thin frame. When the video ended, Simon leaned back in his chair, emotional in a way he rarely allowed himself to be. He turned to his staff member standing nearby and said, "We need to help her. Someone needs to get to her." Later that day, Simon recorded a reaction message. His voice was slower than usual, more careful. He rarely showed vulnerability on camera, but Mira's story left him no choice. "This little girl from Manila," he said, looking into the camera, "has more heart than most adult performers I've seen in my entire career. She wasn't singing for fame. She wasn't singing for applause. She was singing for survival. And yet, she still managed to deliver one of the most emotional performances I've ever witnessed." The clip of his reaction spread almost as fast as Mira's original video. Filipinos were shocked, proud, emotional. Even Simon cried. Some commented, "She deserves the world," others wrote. Meanwhile, back in Manila, Mira had no idea she had gone viral. She sat near a small street corner, eating the leftover rice someone had given her after the performance. She had no phone, no television, no way of knowing that millions of people now knew her name. She just felt grateful she had eaten that day. 2 days after the video exploded, the Spread the Smile team returned to Rizal Park with a mission. They searched for hours, asking locals, vendors, and street kids if they had seen Mira. Finally, near a bench under a tamarind tree, they found her curled up, half asleep, hugging her knees to stay warm. When they approached her, she panicked at first, thinking she was in trouble. But then they gently explained who they were, that the world had seen her video, that people wanted to help her. She listened quietly, confused, unsure whether to believe them. Then they showed her the video of Simon Cowell reacting to her. Mira stared at the screen, her mouth slightly open. When she heard Simon say her name, her eyes filled with tears. Not because she understood his fame, but because for the first time in her life, someone important cared. Someone saw her, not as a begging child but as a person with value. The team gave her food, clothes, school supplies, and promised to help her enroll in programs that could change her life. As she ate a warm meal, tears rolled down her cheeks. This time, not from hunger, but from hope. Her story had begun with a simple question about food. Now it was becoming something far bigger. And Mira, the little girl from Manila, finally smiled. A real, bright smile. One that could indeed spread to the world.